everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to my July reading wrap-up. Hi, hello! This month was a great reading month, number-wise, and like low-key middling to high for ratings-wise. So this month I read 16 books and DNF'd 1, but you know, reading 16 books is crazy good considering most of my year has been around the 9-10 mark. July shot off. So this month I ended up reading everything from a DNF to a 4.5 star. So I didn't find any 5 stars this month, but I came pretty close with 2, which I'll talk about in a bit. But out of all of the genres that I read 5 YA fantasies, I read 5 adult fantasies, 5 middle grades, and 1 regular fiction novel. So let's just get into this. This month was also my Friends Pick My TBR number 4. So because that video is going to be going up next week for you guys, I will just quickly run through everything I read for that video, and I will save my thoughts for the video proper when you guys will see it next week. So out of all of them, they're really out of order, but I ended up reading 3 middle grades for that video. I ended up finishing the books at the beginning by reading book 2 and book 3. Book 2 I gave 3 stars, book 3 I gave 4 stars. That's a little bit complicated, but both of these are great, and the trilogy overall is a super lovely high fantasy middle grade, kind of in the vein of like Eragon vibe-wise. It is urban fantasy and deals with like time travel, so nothing like Eragon. Well, there are a few battles in there that feel like Lord of the Rings-esque, which is very Eragon-esque, but you get the gist. Very good. And I'm glad I finally finished that trilogy. Another middle grade that I ended up reading this month for that video was Zachary Ying and the Dragon Emperor by Xuan Jie Zhao. This is a Chinese-American inspired mix of, I want to say, like The Storm Runner by J.C. Cervantes with Warcross by Marie Lu. That kind of a vibe. Quite good, 3.5 stars. And then I ended up reading a couple YA fantasies. So we'll start with my least favorite, which was Bring Me Their Hearts by Sarah Wolf, which I ended up giving 2 stars. It wanted to be this like angsty, dramatic, dark YA fantasy. It ended up just being whiny and not good. So that got 2 stars. I also ended up finally reading Truth Witch off my TBR, which I'm glad that my friend Hannah picked for this video. It's by Susan Dennard. This was fabulous. I gave it 4 stars, a really, really high 4 stars. Like, probably should have been a 4.5, but we're giving it 4 stars for now. I really, really enjoyed reading this. It is sort of high fantasy, YA fantasy again, where you have all these different types of witches that can do different things and can control different elements. I believe at the beginning of this book I wrote down what they all are, which took me a while because it is a map, but we have mainly, they branch off of 6 main categories like Fire Witch, Air Witch, Earth Witch, Water Witch, Aether Witch, and Void Witch. So like, you know, elemental type based magic. Very cool. I also read Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare this month, which is the 2nd book in the Last Hours trilogy, and I friggin' loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars and immediately pre-ordered the 3rd book. I am so excited to see how this trilogy ends. So excited, and because it's a sequel, it's very hard to describe, and it's also a sequel and a spin-off series, so like, the spoilers are layered, but it is following the kids of the like Clockwork Angel series and their shenanigans as that goes on. For that video, I have 3 high fantasies that I ended up reading. I read Half a King by Joe Abercrombie, which I gave 3.5 stars to. This was good and a good introduction to Joe Abercrombie. I had some issues with the writing, but I'm intrigued to see where this goes because it didn't go where I thought it was gonna go at all. And then we have Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. This was chef's kiss, so good, 4.5 stars. So close to being a new favorite. It just didn't give me that feeling of a new favorite book, you know? And I just absolutely loved it. The ending left me reeling and wanting the next one. And we don't even have a cover or a title yet for the next one, so I assume we have a long time to wait before we get our hands on it, but epic is not even enough to describe it. Also in that video I ended up DNFing The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley because as I was starting to read it I realized the content was incredibly problematic, it's incestual, and there's also like, I've read like 25 pages of it, barely, and it was just a lot of like religious hatred and just bad vibes. And then when I was putting it through Goodreads, I found out that the author has allegedly sexually abused her children alongside of her husband, like her and her husband sexually abused their children together. So I am just not going to read any Marion Zimmer Bradley ever, so I immediately dusted that off my TBR and off my shelves. Those are all books that will be featured in that video. So let's get on to the books that I read outside of that video. Okay, so the first book I read this month was The Ballad of Perry Graves, or Perilous Graves, by Alex Jennings. This is a very voicey, batshit crazy fantasy novel that centers around New Orleans, or in an alternate universe New Orleans, and a group of kids in New Orleans who have to, like, you know, do stuff to like save this fictional New Orleans, which is called NOLA. And it's got a magic system. It's got multiple magic systems that I don't quite understand. And it's at the level of like confusion that I'm like, I don't actually know what went on in this, but it was wildly fun to read because it was so voicey. It has a magic system that is centered around music and songs. So I think the main conflict in this is that there is something or someone out there hunting down these main songs that the city of NOLA is like built on. These songs are like the lifeblood of NOLA. So as each of the songs are being hunted and killed, NOLA is slowly crumbling. I think that's the easiest way to explain it. It is wild. It is a ride. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It's more of a 3.5, but we're gonna keep it at a 4. It was very, very good. It reminded me a lot of The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, and the same voicey, weird city nature. And if you ever are interested in picking this up, I highly recommend the audiobook because it is written in a way, especially the dialogue, where it is coded in a thick New Orleans accent. So if I was reading this with just my eyes, I would have such a hard time getting through it. But the audiobook made it so much fun because it was just so entertaining to listen to. And the narrator is absolutely fantastic. So definitely recommend the audiobook for this one, but 4 stars. Then I ended up, because it was right at the beginning of the month where the world went to hell at the end of July. You remember that? And I'm tired. We have lived through so many different experiences of unprecedented times. It's wild. Anyways, all my brain wanted to do was reread Percy Jackson, so I continued that with the second Percy Jackson book, The Sea of Monsters, which it's a multiple time reread at this point. 4 stars. I love it. And I do want to continue rereading Percy slowly throughout the year, but that is the only one that I read this month. Then I finished up a book club pick, my own book club pick for my book club with my friends, which is The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. This was good and really sparked some great conversations in book club. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, and it really made me think a lot. I liked how time travel was wrapped up in this really extended 800, 900 years of this man's life, and it was like a reincarnation circle vibe. It was very interesting. Not at all what I was expecting going in, but yeah, I did like it. It was just, there were some issues, but that's okay. 3.5 stars. And I will say that one of the relationships in here between Harry August, our main character, and another man named Vincent really reminded me of the relationship between Victor and Eli in Vicious. So if that intrigues you at all, maybe check this out. I don't know. A lot of people on Goodreads say that it's like slow and meandering for no reason. I think the slowness of this book added a level of atmosphere to it because it is so stretched out over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lives, and yet it also felt like episodic but also a little bit circular. It's such an interesting read, and I'm glad that I finally read it and took it off my shelves. Next, I ended up reading a middle grade. I pulled it from my TBR jar. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, it's just in frame right there, my TBR jar there, and I keep meaning to do more TBR jar pulls and put them on like TikTok and stuff. You guys should follow me on TikTok. I got great content over there. I'm loving it. I'm loving TikTok. All my socials are in the description bar at all times. But the first pull from that jar, I went into middle grade because I was reading all these like high fantasies and these deep, intense reads. And so I ended up picking Rick Riordan's Daughter of the Deep. And this is his standalone middle grade, which I ended up giving 3.5 stars to. This was definitely, if it had been a first book in a series, it would have gotten about 4 stars because it felt so much like the setup to a series. But when I was done, I went on Goodreads and I was like, great, this is the first in a series, amazing. When's the next one coming out? And I realized that it's a standalone. Rick intended it to be a standalone for people who are a little bit intimidated into like getting into his canon works because he's got so many books, right? So he intended it to be like a little signpost of like, here, start here for Rick Riordan, or something like that. And that docked it half star because it felt like we got so little of the story wrapped up, and there were a lot of character arcs and moments that I feel like we could get in a series that weren't done properly in this first book. But again, it feels like a Rick first book. So I'm hoping that he ends up opening up this series again, because there's so much in here that we could yet get that I really want to get. Anyways, this is a middle grade centered around Anna Dakar, and it is based on the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea story by Jules Verne. It is very fun, under the sea kind of vibes. I did find the beginning and end way too rushed, but the middle was comfortable and really well done. I love me some Rick Riordan. It didn't have like the signature Rick funny writing, I will say. Our main character is 15 and a girl, and yeah, there were some issues with this that I have, which is why it only has 3.5 stars for me. But it was definitely super fun, especially because it was underwater. And the entire time I was reading it, I was just like, what would Percy do in this situation? How much fun would Percy have in this situation? It would be so much fun for him because it's under the water. So we love to see it. Anyways, at some point, I also read Son of the Storm by Suyi Davies Okongboa, which was something that I pulled from the library, and I only gave it 3.5 stars. It didn't really do it for me. It's probably more of a 3-star book now that I'm like thinking about it in retrospect. It's a decent fantasy book. It's intriguing. It has intriguing magic systems and stakes, but I didn't understand the characters' motivations in this, or the reasons why our main character left their town in the way that they did. I didn't understand it very well, and it just, there was a moment in it where they killed off a character just for like, to get rid of him. It felt like it didn't feel built up in a way that a character death would have actually affect you. It felt almost like for shock value, which never a good thing. Yeah, that one only gets 3.5 stars. And then another one from the library that I also picked up, which also got 3.5 stars, was For the Wolf by Hannah Witten. I'm really glad that I finally did read this, because it was an intriguing enough fantasy book when I picked it up a couple months ago from the library and only got 50 pages in before I had to return it, which is why I put it back on hold and re-got it. But it surprised me in the end, because I usually don't do well with retellings of stories. They just feel bland to me. They always have, and except for Arthurian retellings, I will say that those never feel bland to me. I love them every time. But like story retellings, like Little Red Riding Hood, like this one was, it did surprise me in the end though, because I actually really did like the ending. I liked the way that it unfolded in a way that I do want to check out the second book, although the second book is narrated from the other sister's point of view, which I don't know if I'm gonna like that very much, but who knows, I will check it out. But yeah, it is a Little Red Riding retelling where 2 sisters are born to a kingdom. The first sister is for the throne, the second sister is for the wolf, so they are sacrificed on their like 20th birthday or something to go into the forest and essentially be sacrificed to the wolf to satiate the magic in there or something. I don't really remember very well, but 2 last ones. I finally ended up finishing The Final Strife by Sara El Arifi, and again, this is another 3.5 star for me. The beginning really just didn't do it for me. Just like the last half was good and picked it up for me, thankfully, but the pacing of this book wasn't really that good, and it did drag a lot in places for me and just didn't really catch me. None of the characters really caught on to me or anything, but it was still good. Which is why I get 3.5 stars. If you guys are at all interested in this, I try to explain it in an upcoming video for recent releases number 2. It is going to be featured in that, and I will explain the plot of this much better there. But it follows our main character Scylla, who is a drug addicted and crushed being in this world, who is a person of the higher class but lives in the lower class in this world that is divided by the color of your blood. And there's also this like trial that happens every 10 years called the Aktabar that she was supposed to fight in, but due to unforeseen circumstances her entire family was killed, and so she's just like, you know, living not very well and surviving barely. Through the sequences of this story, she gets tied up with a upper class girl who is actually of the middle class because she bleeds blue, but she's in the upper class because she's like unforeseen different circumstances. Scylla gets tied up with her, and her name is Anur, as her like maidservant, and teaches her and trains her to be part of this Aktabar, these trials, to try and win these trials. So it is a trial book. It is a sapphic romance book. It is, I don't know, it has interesting like blood magic, and it is a very interesting world as well. It didn't really do it for me, but intriguing enough. I don't know if I will continue with the series unless the reviews for the next book are absolutely raving, because a lot of people I've been seeing have been talking about how the plot is weird in that it like lags and isn't very paced well throughout. And finally, to end off the month, I ended up reading Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray, which is a fun YA fantasy where two kids end up teaming up to go into a forest to defeat an ancient being, or ancient creature, that has been terrorizing their village recently by killing people. So we have two main characters, Kofi and Ekon, and they team up to do said thing. And they kind of have like an interesting relationship as they go on. It was good. I gave it 4 stars. It's really a 3.5. There's a lot of 3.5s this month. I wasn't like super grabbed by the characters or anything, but by the end it had got me. We end in a very interesting place and I'm just like, ah. And I probably will be picking up the second one, Beasts of Ruin, at some point, but yeah. I didn't really super buy the relationship in here because our two main characters don't know each other well enough to have connected in that way, because most of the time when they're on this trip into the forest, they are either fighting, or one of them is unconscious and dying, or they are like separated for some reason. And so like they don't actually know each other that well. So the connection they have at the end where they're like, I have to help the other one, I have to fix these things. I don't buy it, because like, why would you do that for someone that you don't really know? I understand the other circumstances around it because like their worldview has changed. So they want to do the right thing in that aspect, but didn't really understand their relationship very much. I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it at the end of the day. Yeah, it was good. It was entertaining and definitely fast, because I read this almost 500-page YA novel in like maybe 5 hours. It was a very fast read. Anyways, my friends, that is everything that I read in the month of July. I didn't end up finding a new favorite, but I found 2 very close favorites with Hunger of the Gods and Chain of Iron. But alas, that is sometimes how it goes. That is sometimes how it goes in the book world. Sometimes we just don't find 5 stars in a month, and that's okay. I did enjoy my reading this month. I'm glad that I read through so many books on my TBR, and I'm really glad that I did my friends pick my TBR number 4, which is super fun. So watch out for that. It's coming next Friday for you guys. Let me know down below what your favorite read of the month was, because I always love hearing from you guys and chatting about the books that you're reading. All right, my friends, that's it for me. I will catch you in another video very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.